The first thing that what he said made me do is it made me think about what I was thinking about. I'd never done that before. It had never occurred to me to think about what I was thinking about. And the second thing it made me do is it made me start to study and compare myself to some really confident and successful athletes and what they were thinking about. And the great thing about being at a place like UVA was I had a lot of those people around me. I mean, I had Dawn Staley on my team, and Dawn's probably one of the greatest women's players that ever played. She played on 3 Olympic teams, and she'll get inducted into the Hall of Fame, and she's one of the most confident and successful athletes, one of the most confident and successful people I've ever been around. And she was my teammate for 3 years. Her locker was right next to mine for 3 years. So we would go play pickup games that spring, and I would start to study Dawn, not necessarily her game, like not her physical skills. I would start to study the way she thought about basketball and the way she thought about herself as a basketball player. Another guy that I spent a lot of time with during that period after my sophomore year was a guy named Rick Carlisle, who's now a head coach in the NBA. And he's the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks now. But at the time, Rick was at the tail end of his pro career. He played 7 or 8 years in the NBA and was on the Celtics team that won a world championship with Bird and McHale and Parrish and those guys. Well, right about my sophomore year, Rick's about 12 years older than me, and he played at Virginia. And right about my sophomore year, Rick was still playing, so he would come back to Charlottesville and train. He'd be in Charlottesville working out all spring and all summer. So that spring and summer, Rick was always in the gym shooting, and I was always in the gym shooting, and he was always in the weight room working out, and I was always in the weight room working out, and so we became friends. And he knew I liked to shoot, he knew I liked to practice a lot, and so he started inviting me to come do these shooting workouts with him. And they were always fun, and they were always competitive, and he almost always beat me. In fact, he says he always beat me. He claims I never beat him, which might be true. But one of the things that I learned, even though I hardly ever beat him, was I had the opportunity to study the way he thought about shooting. And Rick was one of those guys that he's not athletic. He's certainly not a great defensive player, but he could do one thing really, really well, good enough to be on an NBA team for 7 or 8 years, and the one thing he could do well was shoot it. So in all those times we had these competitive shooting games, I started to study, not his form, but I started studying the way he thought about shooting. I started to notice some big differences between the way I thought about the game and the way these really confident and successful athletes thought about the game. The first thing that I started to notice was I could go into a game and I could shoot 9 out of 10. And when I left the gym, what do you think I was thinking about? I was thinking about the one I missed. Like, man, I should have had that one. That was an easy one. I blew that one, man. I missed that one. I should have had that one. A guy like Rick Carlisle or Dawn Staley, they could go into a game and they could shoot 1 out of 10. And when they left the gym, what do you think they were thinking about? I know I missed those 9, but did you see that one? Man, that one was sweet. It was right in that guy's face. They were thinking about the one that felt good. They were thinking about the one that went in. So I learned that we all have what I call selective amnesia. What we tend to remember is different from person to person. I started to realize that what these confident and successful athletes were choosing to remember was very different from what I was choosing to remember.